Valve just announced that Steam now has over 5,000 games that are either verified or playable on the Steam Deck, but there's like over 50,000 games in Steam, and there's a lot of them that are untested that are going to work just fine. This video is about the games that I absolutely love to play on the Steam Deck that I don't think everybody's talking about. These might be games that you've heard of, or maybe you've never heard of them, but they're definitely games that I think you should check out on the Steam Deck. The first one is a game I originally played on my Xbox 360, and I ended up buying it again for the Steam Deck because it was just so good, and it is Ghostbusters, the video game. This game is actually written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. They get the entire cast back together to reprise their roles, and you play as a new recruit who is working for the Ghostbusters, and you guys have to go to all of these cool missions to fight the ghosts. It's a third-person shooter, and I have to say, the thing that they absolutely nailed with this game, other than, of course, the humor and the acting, because it's the originals back again, was the way that I imagine it felt fighting the ghosts. When you lock onto the ghost with a proton stream, and you're trying to pull them over a trap, and you can use that right stick to basically slam them into objects in order to weaken the ghost before you can suck them into the trap. It feels incredibly satisfying, and sure, the game came out in 2009, and by today's standards, the graphics aren't the best, but they did a great job with this game, and it's essentially Ghostbusters 3 with that original cast. So if you haven't checked that one out, it's definitely one that you should have on your list. Now, this game got a lot of praise back in the day, but I don't know if people have talked about it recently, and that's Limbo. Limbo is this 2D side-scrolling horror game, which is a really strange combination. The whole game has a wonderful art direction. Everything's in black and white, and everything is basically a shadow. Even you, the character, who is this little boy who's searching for his sister in this very, very hostile world, you play as a shadow as well, and all you can see are the little boy's white eyes shining through the darkness. Essentially, you move across the world and you will get killed over and over by these things as you try and figure out the puzzles in order to find your sister in this awful, awful place. If you haven't played Limbo, you absolutely should. It plays wonderful on the deck, which is not a huge surprise because it's not a game that requires tons and tons of power. Sticking with the horror genre for a little bit, I'm going to talk about a game that I love, and I'm excited that they're making a new one, and that's Alan Wake. Alan Wake, you play as essentially Stephen King, who is in a Stephen King novel. It's very much Stephen. You don't actually play as Stephen King, you play as Alan Wake, and your wife goes missing in this New England town. You have to try and find her, but as you try and find her, there are these weird shadow monsters that are attacking, and the only way for you to defeat those shadow monsters is by shining lights on them in order to weaken them before you can shoot them with your gun. It is essentially a third-person shooter with a really, really cool story and pretty decent voice acting. And boy, outside of the very heavy-handed Duracell product placement, because you need Duracell batteries to run your flashlight, it's fantastic. I like it a lot, and I especially like when you come upon the TVs in the world. They have this off-brand Twilight Zone that's playing, a secondary story that's like the B story behind the A story. It's a cool game. If you haven't played it, you should definitely check it out, especially because there's a new one on the way. Moving from the third-person shooters to the first-person puzzlers would be Antichamber. I think Antichamber is heavily overlooked. Now, this game is definitely made for a mouse and keyboard, but because of Steam input, you can customize the controls, and it plays wonderfully on the Steam Deck. You are in this really amazingly, I love the art direction for Antichamber, and as you play the game keeps changing. Essentially, you walk through these corridors, but then you start doubling back and the corridors are not the same way that they were, and you might have to solve puzzles by walking through a corridor backwards. And then eventually you get a gun that can shoot colors, and you can use those colors in order to solve other puzzles. If you haven't played Antechamber, you gotta check it out. It's really weird. I never finished it because I couldn't figure out some of the puzzles, but it's awesome, and it plays incredibly well on deck, even though it's not designed for controllers. Now, this is definitely an older game, but it's a game that was really popular when it first came out, and I don't think people are talking about it much these days, and that's Pac-Man Championship Edition. It's perfect for the Steam Deck because of its portable nature, and you can play this game in 5 and 10 minute bursts. If you've never played Pac-Man Championship Edition, it takes the formula of Pac-Man and turns it on its head, because you don't just clear the board to move on to the next one. You set a timer, and then you play while that timer is counting down to try and get as high a score as you can. How do you get a high score? Well, half of the board will fill up with pellets for you to eat. As you go around eating those pellets, you're going to get chased by an ever increasingly long line of ghosts. As you eat those pellets, you've got this long line behind you. You eat a power pellet, you can turn around, eat that huge line of ghosts, and then eat the fruit. The fruit then populates the other side of the board with more dots, and then you go across the other side, eat those, and you just rinse and repeat to try and get the highest score you can possibly get in 5 or 10 minutes. The game plays wonderfully on the Steam Deck, and of course, because it's a portable system, you can always sit down, play for 5 minutes, and put it away. I love this game, and you should check it out. Next up is Axiom Verge. If you've never played Axiom Verge, it is this, you play as like a scientist that goes to an alien world, and it is a side-scrolling adventure like Metroidvania style game. You have these really cool weapons that all have different abilities, and you also get the ability to move through walls and stuff. It's got an awesome aesthetic to it if you like 16-bit style games, and the whole thing was made by one guy. When it first came out, it got all kinds of hype, and recently Axiom Verge 2 came out. I'm still playing Axiom Verge 1 because I love it, and I'll probably pick up Axiom Verge 2 when I finish this first awesome Metroidvania. Next up is Speedrunners. The way that I would describe this game is side-scrolling Mario Kart, which sounds really, really weird. You are running as these different ridiculous characters, and you can pick up different power-ups in order to give you weapons to use against them, like a grappling hook to grab somebody in front of you and trade places with them, or rockets to shoot them, or a freeze gun in order to freeze them into an ice block. And you go through this course, I guess is the way that I would describe it, basically in a big loop, over and over and over, trying to stay out in front of everybody else. As you're going around this loop, the screen continually gets smaller and smaller, and anybody who is the furthest person back, who goes off the screen for any length of time, they are no longer in the race. And you keep going around in the loop until there's only one person left, and then you start over again. It's super simple and very addictive, and it's awesome, and I don't think nearly enough people are playing Speedrunners. It's a fantastic game. You should check it out. Next up is Final Fantasy XII. This isn't exactly a diamond in the rough. This is a game that a lot of people have played before, and I've talked about it on the podcast in the past. Basically, it is a fantastic JRPG, feels very Star Wars-y in its setting, and you, of course, are doing the same Final Fantasy stuff that you always do, but the way that you play this feels very much like an MMO that has been turned into a single-player game, so that you are playing as the entire party all at once, which makes sense because this is coming off of Final Fantasy XI, which was Square's foray into the massively multiplayer online role-playing game genre. So then they tried to take that game, that feeling, and apply it to a single-player game, and I think that they absolutely nailed it. The game has a really cool mechanic in it where you can earn actions that your characters can perform on their own without you needing to tell them what to do. It's a bananas way to play a JRPG, but once you start to uncover how that system works, you're in for a long haul. I've probably got about 50 hours into it so far, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. If you haven't played Final Fantasy XII, the Steam Deck is the best place to play it, in my opinion. Next up is a game that I just picked up the other day because my buddy Lloyd told me about it, and that is Warhammer Chaos Bane. It is a top-down, it's an isometric Diablo-like game where you are in the Warhammer universe, which I know nothing about. But it says that it's unsupported on Steam Deck. It works absolutely fine. Now, that might be because online doesn't work, but I'm playing it as a single-player game, and I really, really like it. I'm currently playing as a dwarven engineer, and as I move through, I've got some really cool abilities to like charge forward, leaving a trail of fire behind. I have like a flamethrower that I can use, and then when I use my flamethrower too much, my engineering suit, I guess is what I would call it, overheats, and then I have to vent that out, but that's yet another attack that I use with my right stick. When I first launched the game, it didn't do anything, so then I closed it down and turned it on again, and everything since then has been working really, really well. I'm super early in the game, but so far I'm really enjoying this one. Before we get to the last one, do me a favor and click that like button down below, and then leave a comment of your favorite games that you've been playing on the deck that you don't think anybody else is talking about. If you don't have a deck yet, then just leave down below your favorite emoji for the algorithm. Now, last year, this game came out and I really enjoyed it, but I've been playing it more on my Steam Deck, and it plays incredibly well on the deck. It's called Phantom Abyss. If you've never played Phantom Abyss, the idea behind it is that only one person can ever finish a level. The levels are procedurally generated, and when you are playing a level and you see other people playing the level, all of those other people have died playing that level. And now it's your turn to try. So as you are running through the level, if you die, your ghost will be left behind, and the next person who goes to play that level, it's going to be their chance to try and finish a level. Now, spoilers, I suck at video games. I've never finished a level of Phantom Abyss, but every time I try, I do have fun. It is a first-person parkour game with those procedurally generated levels, and the idea that nobody can play a level that anybody else has ever finished is just really, really appealing to me. So those are some of my favorite games to play on the Steam Deck. If you just got your Steam Deck, you want to learn more about it, check out this video of 5 tips for new Steam Deck owners. And if you want to learn how Steam Input works, check out this video right here. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill.